What if I told you that the scariest things people have ever seen were not in the dark? Most of us assume horror lives in the night, in the woods, in abandoned places. But the 10 people in tonight's video, they weren't in any of those places. They were at work. They were at home. They were driving down a road they'd driven 100 times before. And then they saw something. Something that was never meant for them to see. Tonight, I've collected 10 of the most disturbing first-person accounts I've ever come across. Stories that have kept me up past 3 in the morning reading them, verifying them, and trying to understand them. Some of these people reported what they saw to authorities. Some never told anyone until now. And a few of them say that what they saw changed something inside them. Not their minds. Not their memories. Something deeper than that. Stay with me. This is going to be a long one. Make yourself comfortable. But maybe leave a light on. Marcus worked at a big-box home improvement store for 6 years. He knows the store layout the way you know your own bedroom. Every aisle, every stockroom shortcut, every blind spot in the security cameras. That last part matters. It was a Tuesday in late October. Marcus was on a closing shift. Just him, his manager Linda, and a colleague named Derek working the floor. The store closed at 9. At 9:15, Marcus was doing his usual sweep of the back stockroom to make sure no customers had accidentally gotten locked in. He had done this hundreds of times. He was not nervous. There was no reason to be nervous. The back stockroom at this particular store was divided into 2 sections. The main section, shelves of inventory, forklifts, pallets, and then what the employees called the deep back. The deep back was technically off-limits to regular floor staff. It held special order merchandise, items awaiting return, and things that had been flagged for damage assessment. You needed a manager's key to get in. Marcus swept the main stockroom. Nothing. He called out, "Store's closed? Anyone back here?" Standard procedure. No answer. He was turning to leave when he noticed the door to the deep back. It was open. Not wide open. Not hanging off its hinges. Just ajar. Maybe 6 inches. Marcus stopped. He stood there for a moment. The door to the deep back required a key to open from the outside. Could only be opened from the inside without a key, which meant either a manager had opened it and forgotten to close it, or someone was already inside. "Linda," he called. No response. He pulled out his radio and tried to reach her. Static. The radios in the deep stockroom were always spotty. Something about the thickness of the walls. Marcus is not someone who describes himself as fearful. He was in the Army National Guard for 4 years. He's a large man. He said this to me directly when he told me this story. "I want you to understand that I am not someone who scares easily. I need you to understand that so that when I tell you what happened next, you believe me." He pushed the door open. The deep back was dark, the overhead fluorescence on a motion sensor timer, and as Marcus stepped inside, the lights flickered on in sequence, that slow cascade from the front of the room to the back. The room was long, narrow shelving units on both sides, merchandise on pallets covered in shrink wrap. At the very back, 2 large rolling cages, the kind you use to move heavy items, were parked side by side. One of the rolling cages was moving, not rolling, not being pushed, just rocking, gently, as though something inside it was shifting its weight from one foot to the other. Marcus called out again. His voice, he said, came out quieter than he wanted it to. The rocking stopped. Marcus did what he would later describe as the dumbest thing I've ever done. He walked toward it. He told me he wasn't sure if it was training or stupidity, maybe both, but he moved down that narrow aisle toward the 2 rolling cages. At about 10 feet away, he could see that the cage was wrapped in shrink wrap. Someone had wrapped it almost entirely in the clear plastic, the way you'd secure a pallet for shipping. But this cage was not a pallet. It was a 6-foot rolling metal cage. and the shrink wrap was moving, expanding and contracting slowly in the middle section. Marcus said he stood there for what felt like a full minute but was probably 5 seconds. And then he turned around, walked out of the deep back, locked the door behind him with his own emergency master key, and called 911. Police arrived within 8 minutes. They found the cage. Inside the shrink wrap, and Marcus still gets quiet when he tells this part, they found a man. He was alive. He was conscious. He had climbed inside the cage earlier in the day before closing, and wrapped himself inside the shrink wrap from within. He was waiting. There was a duffel bag with him. Inside the duffel bag, zip ties, a roll of duct tape, and a hunting knife still in its sheath. He had been in that store, in that cage, for over 4 hours. The man was arrested. He had a history of similar incidents at businesses across the Midwest, and there were active warrants for his arrest in 2 other states. Investigators would later say, though not publicly, that they believed this was not the first time he had done this successfully. Marcus no longer works in retail. He says the worst part isn't what he found. The worst part is the question he still can't answer at night when he lies awake thinking about it. If he hadn't noticed the door was ajar, what was the man in the cage waiting for Linda to do before she left? Her name, for our purposes, is Yael. She asked me not to use her real name and not to disclose the specific company she worked for. What I can tell you is that she was employed as a remote sensing technician, someone who processes satellite and aerial imagery for geological and environmental survey work. This is a legitimate, well-paying technical profession. In the summer of 2019, Yael was assigned to process a batch of aerial survey images from a remote corridor in northern Canada, an area roughly 200 kilometers north of the nearest permanent settlement. The survey was commissioned for mineral rights assessment. Standard work. The images came in as high-resolution TIFF files, thousands of them, each covering a small geographic patch. Yael's job was to run them through processing software, flag anomalies, and produce a clean dataset for the geological team. She was about 400 images into the batch, day 2 of what should have been a week-long job, when she flagged an image for review. She told me, "I flag things all the time. Animal movement, equipment left by prior survey teams, natural formations that read as anomalies to the software. It's routine. When I flagged this one, I thought it was going to be a routine explanation. It was not a routine explanation. The image showed a rectangular clearing in dense boreal forest. Not unusual clear-cuts, old campsites, logging roads create rectangles in forests all the time. What was unusual was what appeared to be inside the clearing. Structures. Not ruins. Not debris. Structures. Intact, apparently operational structures. Multiple buildings in a deliberate arrangement, connected by what appeared to be covered walkways. The image resolution was good enough that Yael could see what looked like vehicle tracks on an internal road. And the structures had shadows. This is important. The survey images were taken at a known time of day. From the angle and length of the shadows, Yael, who had been doing this job for 7 years, could tell that these structures were not small. The main building appeared to be at least 3 stories tall. In an unmarked location, in a remote forest, 200 kilometers from the nearest town, with no access road connecting it to any known infrastructure. Yael flagged the image. Then she spent 3 hours trying to find any record of the location, any mining claim, any government land registry entry, any environmental permit, any record at all. Nothing. She went back to the image. She noticed something she had missed on the first pass. On the southern edge of the facility, she was calling it a facility now in her head, there was a small cleared area, separate from the main structure. In the cleared area, there were shapes arranged in rows. At the resolution she was working at, the shapes were ambiguous. They could have been equipment, vehicles, storage containers. She increased the image resolution. They were mounds. earthen mounds, arranged in uniform rows, evenly spaced. Yael counted them. She counted them 3 times. She got the same number each time. 47 mounds. She reported the image to her supervisor. Her supervisor told her to make a note of the coordinates and move on, that it was probably an old mining camp or a private hunting lodge. Yael said the response felt rehearsed, flat. 2 days later, she received an internal company message informing her that the image batch she had been working on was being pulled from her queue and reassigned for quality review. She was given a new batch of images from a completely different geographic area. She had, before turning in her laptop that evening, made a personal copy of the flagged image. She has shown it to 3 people, a former colleague, a journalist, and me. I have seen the image. I am not going to tell you what I think those 47 mounds are. I'm going to let you reach your own conclusion. Patricia's husband Ray went missing for 11 days in the fall of 2017. He was a deer hunter. He knew those hills the way he knew his own face. He had never gotten lost. He had never failed to come home on the day he said he would. On October 14th, he kissed Patricia goodbye, told her he'd be back by Sunday at the latest, and drove his truck up to their hunting cabin 20 miles into the hills. Sunday came and went. Patricia called the sheriff's office on Monday morning. A search party was organized. They found Ray's truck at the cabin, his gear inside. His rifle was on the table, loaded. His boots were by the door. His boots were by the door. He had gone into the woods in his socks. 11 days later, on a Wednesday morning, Patricia's nearest neighbor, a farmer named Grady who lived about 3 miles up the road, called her at 6 a.m. He said, "Patricia, your husband is standing in my driveway. I thought you should know before the kids see him." Patricia drove to Grady's farm. Ray was standing at the end of the driveway. He was wearing the same clothes he'd left in, the flannel shirt, the canvas hunting pants. They were dirty but not torn. He was barefoot. He was standing completely still, facing the road. When Patricia got out of the car and said his name, he turned and looked at her. She told me, his face was right. His face was Ray's face. But the way he looked at me, it took him a second too long to recognize me. Like he was searching a file and it took an extra beat to come up. And the thing is, after 31 years, Ray's face when he sees me is the most familiar thing in my life. That extra beat, that 1 second. I felt it in my chest like a wrong note in a song you've known your whole life. Ray was taken to a hospital. Physically, he was largely fine. Malnourished, dehydrated, with some unexplained bruising on his lower back and the soles of his feet. No frostbite despite temperatures in the low 40s. No injuries consistent with a fall or animal encounter. He had no memory of the 11 days. None at all. His last clear memory was sitting down on a log to eat his lunch on the first afternoon of his hunt. After that, nothing. He said it wasn't like being asleep. He said it was like those days simply did not exist. He came home 3 weeks later. Patricia told me that by that point she was trying very hard to convince herself that the strangeness she had noticed was just her own anxiety, her own relief twisting itself into something dark. She wanted her husband back. She loved her husband. But things were different. Small things at first. Ray had always taken his coffee black. Now he poured milk into it without being asked, and seemed confused when she mentioned he'd never done that. He had called their daughter by the right name but got the grandchildren's names slightly mixed up. Not badly, just occasionally swapped. He started sleeping differently, waking at 4 a.m. and going to sit in the kitchen. Patricia told me about one night, about 2 months after he came back, when she woke at 3 a.m. and Ray was not in bed. She went downstairs. He wasn't in the kitchen. She found him in the backyard, standing in the dark, barefoot in November. She said his name. He turned around, and in the dim light from the window she could see that his eyes were. She searched for the right word, absent, like a phone that's on but with a black screen. Then he blinked, and he said, "Sorry, Patty. Couldn't sleep. Come on, it's cold. Let's go in." And he smiled, and the smile was Ray's smile. Patricia said that was the worst moment. The smile being right. Ray is still alive. He and Patricia are still married. She says that 90% of the time, he is completely himself, her husband of 31 years, the man she knows in her bones. But sometimes, she says, she'll look at him across the dinner table and for just a moment, just a fraction of a second, she'll see that blankness again, that searching the file quality. And in those moments, she says, she presses her foot against his under the table and waits, and he always presses back. She says she has decided that the pressing back is enough. She doesn't tell me if she fully believes that. There is an industry that most people who use the internet never think about. It employs tens of thousands of people in countries around the world. It runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the people who work in it see things, systematically, repeatedly by professional requirement, that the rest of us will never see. Content moderation. The person who submitted this story asked for complete anonymity. I'll call them Sam. Sam worked as a content moderator for one of the largest social media platforms in the world for 3 years. Sam's specific role was on a team that reviewed flagged videos, not the standard queue but an escalation queue. The things that had already been flagged as potentially extreme and required a trained reviewer to make a final determination. Sam told me they had seen things in that job that they would carry for the rest of their life. But they said most of those things were, in a bleak way, categorizable. Violence, abuse, graphic accidents. The content was horrifying, but it fit into a known category. They had been trained for it in a clinical way. They knew what they were seeing. This was not one of those videos. About 8 months into the job, Sam was reviewing an escalated video that had been flagged by the AI system for, and this is the formal category, anomalous content unclassified. This flag was rare. The AI was very good at classification. When something triggered the unclassified flag, it usually meant the video was either a technical artifact, some kind of test content uploaded by mistake, or, occasionally, something the system had never encountered before. The video was 12 minutes and 44 seconds long. It appeared to have been filmed inside a large institutional building, the kind with dropped ceilings and fluorescent lighting and long identical corridors. A hospital, possibly, or an old school, or a government building. The corridors were empty. For the first 6 minutes, nothing happened. The camera moved through corridors, turned corners, past doors. No people. No sound except footsteps. Sam told me, "In this job, you develop a sense for videos very quickly. You learn to feel where they're going. And with this video, I had a feeling I'd never had before on the job. I didn't feel dread, I felt confused. Because nothing was happening, but I couldn't look away. At the 6-minute and 14-second mark, the camera stopped moving. It was pointed down a long corridor. At the far end of the corridor, Sam estimated 60 or 70 feet away, there was a figure, standing still, facing the camera. The figure was at a distance and the image quality was not perfect, but Sam could tell that the figure was a person. Adult, average height, wearing what appeared to be ordinary street clothes. For the next 4 minutes, the camera did not move. The figure did not move. Then, at the 10-minute and 40-second mark, the figure raised one hand. It held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. Then the figure walked forward, at a normal walking pace, toward the camera. Sam reported that they sat watching the figure approach for the remaining 90 seconds of the video. At a walking pace over 60 feet, the figure would have reached the camera in perhaps 15 seconds. But in the video, the figure walked for 90 seconds and never got any closer. The video ended. Sam escalated the video with a detailed review note. It was flagged for offline review by a senior team. 3 days later, Sam received a message from their team lead informing them that the video had been reviewed and removed per community guidelines. Standard language. Sam asked what the video was determined to be. The team lead said the determination was confidential. Sam told me, "In 3 years I had never been told a determination was confidential. Not once. I had reviewed videos that made me physically ill. And no one had ever told me a determination was confidential." Sam left the job 4 months later. Not directly because of the video, for the broader toll of the work. But Sam told me that of all the things seen in 3 years of professional content moderation, things far more explicitly disturbing than a figure in a hallway, this is the one they still think about. They still don't know what they were watching, and they said they've reached the point where they're not sure they want to. Hospitals have their own folklore. Every nurse, every orderly, every night shift worker who has spent enough years in a hospital building will eventually tell you about the things that happen in those buildings that don't fit into any clinical explanation. Most of those stories, I believe, can be explained. Grief and exhaustion do strange things to the human mind. Night shift work in a place associated with death and trauma creates a very specific psychological environment. But then there's what a nurse I'll call Diana saw on floor 7 of a Midwest teaching hospital in the spring of 2020. You'll remember what was happening in hospitals in the spring of 2020. Diana was working 60-hour weeks during the worst of it. Her floor, a general medical floor that had been converted to overflow capacity, was beyond stretched. She was running on 4 hours of sleep, caffeine, and what she described as a kind of professional autopilot. Floor 7 of this hospital had originally been a long-term care ward. At the beginning of the pandemic, it had been officially decommissioned, too costly to staff as a dedicated long-term unit, and was supposed to be empty. Staff used its supply closets for overflow storage. On a Thursday night in early April, Diana was pulling extra 4 supplies from floor 7's storage room. It was 2 in the morning. The floor was dark except for the emergency lighting, dim green-tinted overheads at intervals down the hall. She pulled her cart out of the supply closet and was heading back to the elevator when she heard a sound. Music, coming from one of the patient rooms at the far end of the hall. Diana stopped her cart. She stood in the silent, green-lit corridor, listening. The music was faint. She couldn't identify what it was, exactly. But it was steady, not a phone alert, not a TV accidentally left on. It had the quality of a radio station, warm and continuous. She walked down the hall. The music was coming from room 718. Diana told me that as she stood outside that door, she had a very clear and calm thought. There is someone in that room. Not a frightened thought. A certain one. She knocked on the door. The music stopped immediately. She opened the door. The room was empty. Stripped down, no linens on the bed, no equipment beyond the bare wall fixtures. The kind of emptiness that happens when a room hasn't been occupied in months. Except, on the stripped mattress there was an impression. The kind of gentle dent left when a person has been sitting or lying on a surface for a long time. A body-shaped compression in the old foam. And on the bedside table, a small formica table bolted to the wall, the kind found in every hospital room in the country, there was a single item. Playing card. Face up. The king of spades. Diana stood in that doorway for a long time. She was a person who prided herself on rational thinking. She was exhausted. She knew that. She inventoried every possible explanation. The music. A phone left by a supply runner, playing through the wall. Thin hospital walls, sound carrying from another floor. Her own overtired brain manufacturing something in the ambient noise. The impression in the mattress, probably old. Someone sitting down to inventory supplies. The playing card, Someone brought it to that floor at some point. It meant nothing. She picked up the card and put it in her pocket. She went back to her floor and finished her shift. The next morning, before she left, she asked the facilities manager about floor 7, specifically who was the last patient in room 718. The facilities manager looked up the records. He told her the last patient in that room had been a retired music teacher from a small town about 40 miles away. He had been a long-term resident on that floor for 18 months before the unit closed, and he was transferred to a nursing facility nearby. Diana asked if he was still alive. The facilities manager checked. He had died the previous Tuesday, 4 days before Diana found the playing card. Diana told me she doesn't believe in ghosts. She told me this clearly and firmly at the beginning of our conversation. She said she believes in grief and coincidence and the strange mechanics of an exhausted mind. She still has the card. She can't bring herself to throw it away. Eric has been fishing the waters off the Pacific Northwest coast for 22 years. He grew up on the water. He knows it the way other people know a neighborhood, its rhythms, its moods, its bad spots, and its good ones. He is not, he told me, someone who tells stories like this. He is not someone who visits channels like this one. He contacted me through a friend of a friend because he said he had been carrying what he saw for 3 years and needed to put it somewhere. It was November, pre-dawn, maybe 4:30 in the morning. Eric was running his vessel, a 50-foot commercial trawler, north along a route he knew very well, about 12 miles offshore. The sea was rough but manageable. There was a weather system moving in from the west. Eric wanted to make his destination before it hit. He was alone on the bridge. His 2 crew members were below. On his radar, a contact appeared. A vessel approximately 2 miles ahead, running with no lights. No AIS signal, the automatic identification system that commercial and recreational vessels are required to broadcast. Just a radar blip. A vessel running dark, offshore, at 4:30 in the morning. Eric reduced speed. He picked up his radio and hailed on channel 16, the distress and calling channel, the one everyone monitors. No response. He watched the contact on radar. The vessel was not moving. Dead in the water 2 miles ahead. Eric told me he considered his options. A vessel dead in the water in building weather, running dark, not responding to radio, that is, at minimum, a potential distress situation. Maritime law and maritime ethics both pointed the same direction. He closed the distance. At a 1/4 mile, he put his spotlight on it. It was a fishing vessel, about 40 feet. Older, the kind of workboat that's been used and repaired and used again for decades, painted over so many times you couldn't identify the original color. It was riding low in the water. Eric hailed again by radio. Nothing. He hailed by bullhorn, the electric loudhailer he used to communicate with crew on deck. Nothing. He brought his vessel alongside, roughly a boat length away, his spotlight sweeping the deck of the other vessel. The deck was covered in fish. Not in holds, not in containers. Just fish. Loose fish, packed from rail to rail, piled 2 and 3 feet deep in some places, glistening in the spotlight. Hundreds of them. Thousands of them, maybe. And in the fish, Eric said this slowly and deliberately when he told me. In the fish there were hands, arms, bare human arms, extending upward from the mass of fish, fingers spread, as though people buried beneath the fish were reaching toward the surface. Eric told me he sat at his helm for what felt like a long time. His spotlight did not waver. He counted. He could see 6 sets of hands, possibly more near the bow where the pile was deepest. He called the Coast Guard. He gave them coordinates. He described what he was seeing. The dispatcher's tone changed. Eric said he had been on the radio to Coast Guard stations dozens of times in his career, in actual emergencies, and he had never heard a dispatcher's voice change the way this one changed. It became very careful, very precise, very focused. They told him to maintain position and not to board the vessel. Under any circumstances, not to board the vessel. A Coast Guard cutter arrived 42 minutes later. 2 more vessels behind it. Eric was asked to move off to a distance of half a mile. He complied. He watched from that distance, in the dark, as the Coast Guard worked the boat with lights and crew for over 3 hours. He was later contacted by a federal agent and asked to provide a formal statement. He was asked not to discuss what he'd seen, in the interest of an active investigation. He signed a document. He doesn't fully understand, he said, what he signed. He has searched news archives. He has found nothing, no report, no investigation, no case that matches the date and location. He told me, "I've seen bad things on the water. I've helped pull people out of the water who didn't make it. I know what it looks like when the ocean takes people. This was not that. This was something else. And I don't know what to do with it." He's still fishing. He's back on the water every season. But he told me he no longer runs that particular offshore route. He doesn't say why. I didn't push him. Simone grew up in a small community in rural Georgia. About 40 houses, a church, a general store, maybe 200 people total. She moved away when she was 18 to go to college and has not gone back since. This is the reason why. About 6 months before she left for college, when she was 17, Simone started noticing that one of the houses in her community had a new door. This sounds mundane. It isn't. The house in question was at the end of a dirt road at the edge of the community. It was occupied by a man everyone called Mr. Abraham Henley, an elderly widower who had lived there alone for as long as anyone could remember. He was not unfriendly, but he was private. He attended church sporadically. He waved when you passed. That was the extent of most people's relationship with him. The new door was red. Not a normal barn red or a painted porch red. A very specific, very saturated, almost unnaturally vivid red. Simone said it looked like it was lit from behind, though she could never explain that impression. The door just seemed to glow. She mentioned it to her mother. Her mother said, simply, "Don't look at it," and moved on to the next topic of conversation. That is not a normal response. Over the following weeks, Simone asked other people in the community about the door. Most changed the subject. A few said they hadn't noticed any new door. A girl her own age, a friend she'd known since first grade, looked at her with an expression Simone described as frightened and said, "Why are you asking about that?" and walked away. Then people started leaving. In a community of 200 people, you notice when families move away. Over the following 4 months, 7 families, roughly a quarter of the community, left. Not all at once. 1 or 2 houses at a time. Some had explanations. A job offer, a family illness, retirement. But Simone knew these people. She had grown up alongside them. The explanations felt hurried. She asked her mother why people were leaving. Her mother said, "People have their reasons." Then she looked directly at Simone and said, "We are leaving too. I'm looking at apartments in the city. This is not a discussion." Simone went back to Mr. Abe's house one night, alone. She told me she still doesn't fully know why. She said it was partly adolescent defiance, partly genuine compulsion, and partly, she paused a long time before saying this, partly because she felt like the door was asking her to. She walked up to the house in the dark. She stood in front of the red door. She told me, "Standing in front of that door was the most wrong I have ever felt. Not scared. Wrong. Like being in a place you know you aren't supposed to be, but deeper than that. Like being in a space that had been built for a purpose that I wasn't supposed to understand." She knocked on the door. She heard footsteps. Then the door opened. Mr. Abe was there. He looked at her. His expression was hard to read. Not unkind, but complicated. He said, You shouldn't be here, honey. You go on home now. And then he looked past her, just for a moment, into the dark behind her. He said, "Don't look behind you. Just turn around and walk home and don't stop and don't look behind you. Can you do that?" Simone said she could. She turned around and walked home. She did not look behind her. She does not know if there was anything there. Her family moved to the city 3 weeks later. She left for college shortly after. She has not returned to the community. She told me she recently found a satellite image of the community on a Maps app. Most of the houses appear to still be occupied. The house at the end of the dirt road, Mr. Abe's house, is still there. She said she zoomed in as far as the image would let her. The front door is still red. A 911 dispatcher, who I'll call Thomas, has worked in emergency communications for 16 years. He has heard things on that phone line that most people will never hear. He is not, as he put it, easily unsettled. But this call unsettled him. Came in on a Saturday night around 2 in the morning. The caller was a woman. She was whispering. Not because she seemed frightened, Thomas said, but in the careful way of someone who doesn't want to be overheard. Thomas greeted her. She said, quietly but clearly, "I need to report something, but I don't know what category it goes in." Thomas, who has heard nearly every variation of distress call imaginable, told her that was okay, to just tell him what was happening. The woman said, "My neighbor came home tonight, but it wasn't my neighbor." Thomas asked her to explain. She said her neighbor, a middle-aged man, single, had lived next door for 11 years, had pulled into his driveway tonight at around midnight. She had seen him come home from work at midnight before. She knew his schedule, but the way he got out of the car was wrong. She said it was the only way she could explain it. Wrong. He moved like someone who had learned what getting out of a car normally looked like but had never actually done it before. Stiff, slightly delayed. His eyes, when the porch light hit them as he walked to the door. She said they were the right color but the wrong quality. She said they were like good photographs of eyes. Thomas asked her if she thought there was an immediate safety risk. She said, "I don't know. I don't know what kind of risk it is. It looked like him. I've known this man for 11 years. But it was not him. I need someone to know that I know it was not him." Thomas told me that on a purely procedural level, he had nothing to dispatch on. No crime reported, no injury, no property damage. But he stayed on the line with her. He asked her more questions. The woman was calm, coherent, articulate. She was not intoxicated. She was not distressed in any clinical sense. She was, he said, simply certain. After about 15 minutes, she said, "I have to go. He's outside, in the driveway, just standing there." Thomas asked if she was safe. She said, "He's not looking at my house. He's looking at the street. He's been standing there for about 10 minutes. He doesn't move." Thomas told her to stay on the line. He put out a non-emergency welfare check request to patrol. A unit happened to be nearby, could swing by. 6 minutes later, the patrol unit arrived at the address. They reported a man standing in a driveway. They made contact with him. He gave his name, his address, said he'd just gotten home from work and stepped out for some air. He was cooperative and lucid. No apparent impairment. Thomas told the woman what the officers had found. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Ask them if they can see his left hand." Thomas relayed the question to the officers on his radio. One of the officers looked at the man's left hand. The officer came back on radio. Thomas told me the officer's voice was slightly different when he reported back. More deliberate. He said, "Dispatch, there's a tattoo on the back of the left hand. Subject says it's new. Got it last week." Thomas relayed this to the woman. She said, "I've known this man for 11 years. He doesn't have any tattoos. And 2 weeks ago, he told me he would never get one because he was afraid of needles his whole life. There is no resolution to this story. The officers cleared the scene. The man was not detained. He had committed no crime. He had his identification. He was coherent. The woman called 911 back once more, 4 days later. She told Thomas's colleague that she had spoken to her neighbor the following morning. He had been entirely normal. He had made no reference to the officers, to the previous night, to anything unusual. She called to say she was moving. She did not say where. Danny drives a refrigerated transport rig, a job that means he spends a lot of nights on empty stretches of interstate in the American Southwest. He knows loneliness of the road in a way most people never will. Long nights in desert country. No radio signal, no other cars, just the white lines and the dark. He says he loves it. He wants me to say that first. He loves the job. He is comfortable with the emptiness. What happened to him on a section of I-10 in western Texas on a July night in 2021 is not something he is comfortable with. He was eastbound, 2 in the morning. He had been driving for about 5 hours since his last rest stop. He was alert. He is careful about that, he emphasized. He checks himself regularly. He was alert. He noticed headlights behind him. A vehicle following him, maintaining a consistent distance. Maybe 300 yards back. He had been aware of it for a while before he really focused on it. Vehicles sometimes run at the same pace as a rig for miles on long straightaways. He watched it in his mirrors. It maintained its distance precisely. When he slowed slightly, testing, it slowed. When he came back to speed, it did too. After about 15 miles of this, Danny moved to exit at a rest stop to let the vehicle pass. He pulled in. He sat in the lot. He waited for the vehicle to come off the highway behind him, expecting it would continue on past. Pulled into the rest stop behind him. Parked at the far end of the lot. Lights off. Danny sat in his cab for about 10 minutes. The vehicle didn't move. He couldn't see anyone get out. Couldn't see clearly what make or model it was in the dark. A sedan, he thought. Dark-colored. He pulled back onto the highway. The sedan pulled out 30 seconds later. 300 yards back. Exact. Danny told me, "I've been followed before. Wrong-turn tourists, people who use my headlights as a guide on dark stretches. This was not that. This had a quality of deliberateness. I'm not sure that's a word, but it felt deliberate." He drove for another 2 miles. Then, without signaling, he took an off-ramp he had not intended to take. One he barely made last second. The kind of off-ramp a car could take but that a truck typically wouldn't. He took it. He looked in his mirrors. The sedan had not taken the ramp. It continued on the interstate. Danny sat on the feeder road for a few minutes. Then he got back on the highway. No sedan. Clear mirrors. He drove the remaining 2 hours to his destination without incident. He filed a report with the trucking company's safety line the next morning. Standard procedure for any on-road concern. They noted it. Nothing came of it. Danny says he doesn't know what the sedan was or what the driver wanted. He says the possibilities he has considered range from the mundane to the genuinely alarming, and he has made peace with not knowing. But he told me one more thing. He said that when he looked in the mirrors after taking that off-ramp and saw the sedan continuing on the highway, not turning back, not pulling over, just carrying on, he had one clear thought. He said, "It was like whatever was following me had a next place to be. Like I was just the stop before. And it was going on to the next stop." He doesn't like to finish that thought. Neither do I. The final story tonight comes from a man I'll call Vincent. He installs and maintains home security camera systems. He has been in his clients' homes in a professional capacity for over 12 years. He has seen a lot of footage. This particular call came from a young couple in a suburb north of Seattle. They had recently had a system installed. Now, 2 weeks later, they were having Vincent back because they kept getting motion alerts at night and wanted to make sure the sensitivity was calibrated correctly. Vincent arrived in the morning. He sat down with his laptop and pulled up the motion-triggered footage from the previous 2 weeks to review the calibration. Most of it was standard false trigger material. Shadows from passing cars, a neighbor's cat, wind-moved plants. And then, 7 nights ago at 2:17 a.m., the system had recorded something. The exterior front camera covered the front yard, the driveway, and the street. At 2:17 a.m., a figure had walked into frame from the left, from the direction of the sidewalk, and stopped in the middle of the driveway. Vincent watched the figure. It was wearing a dark jacket, hood up. It stood in the driveway, facing the front door of the house. For 8 minutes it stood there. Vincent glanced at the couple. They had not seen this footage. They were watching over his shoulder now, and the woman had put her hand on her partner's arm. After 8 minutes, the figure turned to the side. It seemed to be looking at the front window, the living room window. Then it raised its arm and placed its hand, flat-palmed, against the air. Not against the window, not against the door, against nothing, against the air at about window height, as though the window were several feet closer than it actually was. It held that pose. For 4 minutes, it stood there with its hand pressed against nothing. Then it walked away, back the way it came, off frame. The couple asked Vincent what they should do. He told them to call the police and file a non-emergency report documenting the incident, which they did. He also told them he could add supplemental cameras to cover the side approach the figure had used. He went back to his laptop. He scrubbed through the rest of the footage. 5 nights before the driveway incident, 12 nights ago from when Vincent was sitting there, the backyard camera had triggered. The same figure, same dark jacket, hood up, standing at the back fence line, facing the house. Again, 8 minutes of stillness, and then the figure crouched down, slowly, and appeared to be looking at something on the ground near the base of the fence. Looking at it closely, face very near the ground. Vincent went outside and looked at the base of the fence. In the grass, partially obscured by overgrowth, there was a clear plastic bag. Inside the bag were photographs. Photographs of the couple's house, taken in daylight. Multiple angles, multiple visits, the images appeared to span several days. And in 2 of the photographs, one of the house's residents, the woman, was visible through the front window. The police were called. Proper report was taken. An investigation was opened. Vincent does not know the outcome. He told me, "In 12 years of doing this job, I have seen footage of break-ins, vandalism, wild animals, accidents, all kinds of things. I have never seen footage that made me feel what that footage made me feel." I asked him what it made him feel. He said, "Like there is a version of someone's ordinary life happening in the daylight that they can see, and then there is a parallel version of their life being studied in the dark by someone they have never met and don't know exists. And those 2 lives are happening at the same time, in the same house, and only one of the people knows about both of them." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I installed 12 additional cameras before I left that day. My best work. I gave them the most coverage I've ever given a property." Another pause. "I still don't think it's enough. 10 stories. 10 people who saw something they weren't supposed to see. A man waiting in the dark. 47 mounds in the northern forest. A husband who came back from 11 days of nowhere. A figure that never got any closer. A music room no one had used in months. Hands in the dark water. A red door that seemed to breathe. A neighbor who was not a neighbor. A sedan that knew exactly how far back to stay. And photographs taken by someone who knew your home better than you did. All of these people contacted me because they needed, as one of them put it, somewhere to put it. There's a particular kind of weight that comes from seeing something that has no category. It's not the weight of grief or fear or trauma, though those are in there too. It's the weight of knowing. Knowing that the world has seams, and that sometimes in a stockroom or a forest or a corridor or a driveway, the seam becomes visible. And you are the person who happened to be standing there. I want to thank every person who trusted me with their story. Some of them took months to decide. Some of them are still not sure they did the right thing by telling me. For their protection, I keep their real identities close. If you have a story, something you've seen, something you've never told anyone, something that's been sitting with you, you can submit it through the link in the description. I read everything. If this video affected you the way these stories affected me, if it made you look twice at a door, or glance into a dark hallway, or find yourself pressing your foot against something solid just to feel it press back, then I've done my job. Thank you for spending these 2 hours with me. Stay safe, and leave a light on.